Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk! Welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, Adam Bradshaw, and today we have a very special guest in studio, and I've not done one of these in-studio guests for a while, so it's a pleasure to actually have someone next to me and not just speak to the camera. Actually, no, I have my colleagues here next to me. They don't really count, though. They're not special guests, they're just guests. You've come all the way from Scotland, I believe. Ali Stevenson from Turntable is here to tell us everything about this wonderful project. I'm really excited to learn more about this because as much as I have read into it, it's always better to get the story right from the horse's mouth. What's your involvement? What's your position with Turntable?
Nice. First, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here. But Turntable, new company. I started together with my brother Gordon. So we just launched the brand last year. So we both worked in the whiskey industry for about 12 years or so.
Nice.
Never really had the chance to work together before. Always wanted to do that. Wanted to start our own.
So
project.
were you in rival companies before?
Not particularly rival companies.
That doesn't really exist in Scotland, does it?
In the Scotch whiskey industry, it's one of these. It's a unique industry and that it's still quite collaborative. So whilst we were different companies, I wouldn't really class them as rival companies.
Yeah. I would find that interesting. Like some countries have followed on from that, and I feel like Canada is a little bit more like that. We're not, distilleries aren't rivals with each other. Well, a couple are, but like other countries go a completely different direction. Like Japan, like you would never hear of like Suntory and Nika doing a collaboration. Yeah. Like it's just not a thing.
It's always interesting in the different markets as well. With all the different distributors and things, it can be much more cutthroat as well. But
no, fair play. It's all about the blending on the turntable, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when Gordon and I decided we wanted to work together and set up our own project, we started to think what we'd like to do, and we sort of realised we both had this shared frustration that in the whiskey world today, it feels like there's very much a perception single malt whiskey's the quality and blended whiskey's the volume, and we really wanted to try and challenge that perception. So we started thinking about the categories in a lot more detail and started to think what could we really do to play in that space.
Nice. And it's a great space to be playful with. Like I personally love blended whiskey. I've said that many times on this channel. There's and I'm an ambassador for the SNWS, so I have to say I love single cask, but secretly, one of the things I love to do with those green and white bottles back there when I'm at home is make my own little blends with them.
That's really cool.
Blending is a fantastic art.
Well, it's funny, when we started to think about the categories in a bit more detail, you think when blending started, it wasn't really about volume, it was about quality, consistency, flavour combination, and really it was blended whiskey that drove the success of the Scotch whiskey industry.
Absolutely. But the grocers, right? It all started with the grocers.
Exactly. But you sort of think as it became so successful, maybe the strategy had to change a little to keep up with the demand, and blenders would use younger whiskies as components in the blend, or reuse casks many times, or use higher proportion of grain whiskey versus malt whiskey, and the product almost changed over a period of time. But that's sort of due to a change of strategy. It's not because blending was ever a bad concept or a bad philosophy.
But also like changes of like tastes and legislature as well across that as well. Like there was a time when younger whiskey was very much wanted. Like, when Glen Grant first came out as the first single malt available in Europe, like the Italians sent it back and said they wanted something younger. Yeah. And like before we had William Gladstone, everyone was turning out 3-year-olds because there was no tax benefits for having anything older than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose then we also looked at like single malt as a category and started to think you've seen this amazing growth over the last 20-30 years, and you think what's really driving that? And there's no doubt quality is at the front of it. Amazing single malts out there, but we also thought like today's whiskey enthusiast really likes to feel more connected to the brand, so they like to know where the whiskey's coming from, what the location of the distillery is, the history, who's making it, what cask type it's been matured in, and single malt can really provide that connection. So I guess with Turntable, we almost thought, can we in some way try and combine the best of two categories? Can we go back to the idea of a blending house where it's about quality, creativity, flavour combination, but combine it with the care to detail, the transparency, the storytelling more commonly found in the world of single malt today. So things like the transparency piece for us is really important.
Totally.
Massive, yeah.
But it also just makes it a deeper story in a sense, like, because you don't just get to tell the story of one distillery, you can get to tell the story of like 4 or 3 or 5 or however many you put in your blend.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like you said, you're not in competition with like Knockdo.
No,
like Anok's not knocking on your door saying, "Oh, you're taking sales away from us."
No, exactly. to be honest, the opposite in some ways. I would like as we go on to enhance each of these brands and as well, and showcase these components in a different form, but also encourage enthusiasts to go and check out the single malt versions, go and check out each of these distilleries as well. So I would hope that we enhance for everyone. Yeah.
And there's a lot of distilleries that people won't have heard of unless they've tried them in a blend.
For sure, which I mean, even that there, like, I find so interesting, because a lot of the time we talk about the different distilleries, and if they're owned by Diageo or Pernod Ricard and things, a lot of the time these distilleries won't be focused on as a single malt brand. So consumers around the world maybe haven't seen them as much, and sometimes people can think that means they're not as good quality because they're not focused on as a single malt. And I really don't buy into that.
The key thing for that, the key example of a distillery which is absolutely within the industry thought of as an absolute top distillery, but you never see as a single malt, is Linkwood.
Yeah, for sure. Linkwood,
I've seen one official bottling Linkwood in BC.
Clynelish is awesome as well. But my background in the industry was working with Ben Riach Distillery Company and working with Billy Walker for many, many years. So I was with Billy at both Ben Riach and then Glenallachie as well after they acquired that from Pernod Ricard. But both Ben Riach and Glenallachie, when they were owned by Pernod, so Ben Riach was until 2004, Glenallachie was 2017, and Billy acquired both of those distilleries. And with the change of ownership, it brought a change of strategy. Billy wanted to showcase these distilleries as single malt brands, and people around the world had never really seen those brands before. But with a change in strategy and wood management and how to show the brand, these distilleries have performed unbelievably well. But again, it shows that even under Pernod Ricard's ownership as well, they were making fantastic spirit. It was just they had a different purpose for the distillery at the time, but the quality was always there. The quality was really good.
And quality blends have had quite the renaissance in the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Compass Box really kicked it off in the year 2000, but the traditional blenders have really upped their game as well. Like, you think things like Chivas and Dewar's really doing interesting things now.
Absolutely.
And then like new kids on the block coming along in the last 5 years, and just I mean, I've only had one of these so far, and I'm looking forward to the other 5. But let's crack into that actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Number 1, what we got here? Track 1.
Yeah. So track 1, our first ever release. So we're sort of focusing on a light, approachable style of whiskey. So we have Knockdo and Chinquapin so Anok whiskey.
Okay.
We have Linkwood. And then from the grain side of things, we have Girvan and Strathclyde. So the Girvan in ex-red wine cask, the Strathclyde in ex-cognac cask. So it's one of the areas of transparency that's actually a little more difficult.
That's all here on the back of the box, by the way. Yeah.
So one of the areas of transparency that's a little more challenging for us is around age statements. So we would love to give the age of each of the different component whiskies. But the Scotch Whisky Association has a regulation that you can only state the age of the youngest whisky. We're using quite a wide range of whiskies, so we've chosen to go non-age statement on this. But in general, the malt whiskies we're using are sort of between 10 and 15 years old.
Oh, lovely.
And the grain whiskies tend to be quite a bit older, sort of 18 to 30 years old. So a lot of the time people would think grain whiskey, lighter style of whiskey used to sort of stretch out the volume of the blends. We only use grain whiskey where we think it can add something to the overall flavour profile. So for this whiskey, the Girvan is 26 years old and the Strathclyde is 19 years old. So some really, really interesting sort of tropical fruit notes going on in there as well. Yeah.
And especially with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in the last few years, we've seen some incredible single grain whiskies come through.
Absolutely.
Single grain can really sing a solo on its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, well, let's crack open this one. I'm excited. So, Joy Discovery Invention.
So, first, I mean, I guess I'll talk to you a little about the name of the company, Turntable, and then that kind of music connection there as well. So, a sort of second love for Gordon and I beyond the world of whiskey is also music. And sadly, neither of us has any musical talent whatsoever, so a career in music never really beckoned. But
Yeah, you can appreciate it without doing it.
Absolutely.
Right.
We're always kind of fascinated by this connection between whiskey and music, and that I think both have this rare ability to take a person to a different memory, a different place, a different time, and the experience is unique to each of us. So the name Turntable came from there, and also our sort of main ambition as a company is to change this perception that blended whiskies are inferior to single malts. So the idea was sort of turn the table, flip the record on ordinary. And then for the actual names of the whiskies, for the limited editions, we've named them after specific songs. So this one, track 1, was called Joy, Discovery, Invention. It's a song by a Scottish band called Biffy Clyro.
Oh God, it is Biffy Clyro.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember who that was.
Yeah,
nice.
so it's the first song on their first ever album, and it was also the first concert I ever went to back in 2002, 2003, and we thought the words joy, discovery, invention really captured exactly what we want to be about as a blending house as well. So quite cool.
I saw them live on Princess Street at some point. I think it might have been a Hogmanay celebration or something.
It was the Barrowlands I saw them at that first time.
Nice. All right. Would you like to do the honours? It's number 1. I feel like it's only right.
Sure.
Nice. Logo cork pop.
Absolutely.
Nice. And one thing I noticed with the initial series, the 1, 2, 3 that we have in store right now, is it feels like the easiest ways to change the flavor of a whiskey are generally that you can either change the cask, you can make it peated. So it feels like you've kind of hit the 3 main things head on here. We've got like a lighter, sort of more sort of not bourbon cask necessarily, but that kind
American
of style,
oak,
American oaky kind of one.
Yep.
You've got a big sherry one and you've got a peaty one.
Yep.
And that's like the Venn diagram that you kind of start with. And then there's lots of, did it use worm tubs? Did it, all kinds of other things you can do to change it.
Absolutely, but it's kind of interesting. The 3 limited editions we launched, that was the first releases from the company. And in some ways we use these as like a pilot series as well to almost test the market a little, and we knew we'd want to develop a core range that was very diverse in these kind of different categories. So the idea in the future is on limited editions that will be quite innovative and go in different directions on the flavour and things as well. But for these ones, we were also wanting to see what the market response, market feedback was in terms of developing our core range and what styles people would really go into. But
nice.
what you described there, sort of track 1 being that kind of lighter, fruitier style. So for this one, I think there's a lot of the tropical fruits coming through, the sort of pineapple and
it's very much, it feels like on the nose the kind of whiskey that if you like whiskey at all, you're going to like this whiskey. Yeah. Like it doesn't challenge in any specific way. It's not going to be, some people are going like, oh, what is this? It's just it's a whiskey, aromaed whiskey.
Absolutely. It's very much my style of whiskey as well. Those older grain casks coming through, just as you say, the American oak, that linkwood being sort of a main component of 40% as well. That sort of citrusy, grassy nature that you get from the linkwood distillery as well. But a very accessible whiskey for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
So there's a question that I always like asking actual Scottish people, because I lived in Scotland for a while, but I was never really actually Scottish. Although someone did tell me I was allowed to wear their tartan, so that's good. It's a good start.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about whiskey being referred to as Scotch outside of Scotland? Because it's not really a thing we use back home.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
I found it really jarring when I got over here. So.
I don't mind it. I guess I hadn't really thought about it too much, but now you say it, I mean, it does give you a sense of pride as well when you think like this spirit from our small country is enjoyed around the world and has such an amazing reputation. It is something to be quite proud of. But,
absolutely.
But yeah, on the other side of things, some of the New World whiskies coming out today are really exciting as well. There's lots of distilleries away from Scotland, Canada as well for sure, that are making some really exciting products.
Do you think you might do some world blending at some point?
So we've looked at that a little. So we're always quite excited about the thought of cross-border blending. So we thought for one project each year, could we do a collaboration blend with a New World distillery who we think are making great whiskey, pushing boundaries, have a kind of similar philosophy to whiskey making as we do. So we actually did our first collaboration with Starward Distillery in Australia. So they were really, really cool to work with, but Melbourne-based distillery, kind of known for Australian single malt and ex-Australian red wine casks. So we wanted to take that as sort of the base of the blend, really showcase that DNA, but blend it in a way that Starward had never been seen before. So combined with just a little peated whiskey, some older grain whiskey. So this is quite
love
cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
I actually used to work at a distillery in Melbourne, Bakery Hill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's the scene in Australia is really, really interesting. I don't know if it's
distilling is
massive. I don't know if it's changed now. It was incredibly expensive. I know they were working on trying to change some of the tax structure down there. But it was like prohibitively pricey.
I think if anything, it's gone the other way.
Oh no! Which is super weird because New Zealand single malt's actually weirdly approachable in price.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's really nice to hear. I really like the idea of blending in some New World whiskey with Scotch, or other whiskies as well. I don't know if you saw Penderyn recently did a collaboration with some of their own whiskey and some whiskey from Patagonia.
Yeah,
it's like a small Welsh colony in South America. Like what?
Yeah, really cool. No, and it's again, it's just nice to see people pushing boundaries in pursuit of different flavor combination. Is exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in terms of flavor combination, the thing I haven't even taken a sip yet, but the nose is so enticing. It feels like springtime. It feels like it's got like a promise of growth. It feels like it's vibrant. It's going to give you energy. It's like the Red Bull of whiskey. It's going to give you wings.
Absolutely. It's interesting as well, even that liquid is making up the biggest proportion of the whiskey at 40%, but I actually think it is the older grains that shine through the most. I think that the Girvan and the Strathclyde.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing, is if you think about it in a sense, the older grains are more concentrated. So even though there's only 24% of it, like it's a more concentrated liquid after aging that long. So it is going to impact the flavour way more than that ratio.
Yeah, absolutely. And the longer the whiskey sits in the glass, the more of that kind of exotic fruit comes out as well. But really interesting.
So where on earth did you find like a Strathclyde in a cognac barrel?
So in fairness, we have done a lot of re-racking. So wood management is really, really key to what we do. So
you did work with Billy Walker then?
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. But I mean, I think today we own about 1,000 casks.
Nice.
So that could be anything from new make spirit all the way through until sort of 40 years old is the oldest cask we currently have. And I would say like when we're buying casks from different distilleries around Scotland, the quality of the whiskey that we're buying is nearly always excellent. The quality of the cask can vary. It can be quite good. It can be quite poor. So and the quality of cask and wood to the whiskey in the glass is so important. So we do a lot of re-racking. So we source a lot of really good quality casks from Kelvin Cooperage for American oak, so bourbon, ex-rye, chinkapin, virgin oak at different char, different toast levels.
Nice.
And from the bodegas in Spain for the sherry casks, different wineries around Europe. And we've re-racked quite extensively. So we've probably re-racked about 80% of the stock that we've acquired.
Cool.
And we started acquiring stock and re-racking back in 2019, 2020. So even when we first started the project, we almost said to each other at that time that the earliest we will release the brand is 2023, because we wanted that time to get the whiskey into our own casks and get to a quality
weirdly
point. Perfect
timing with the pandemic then. Like you got all the work done before, then there was the waiting period, which you would have been doing not much anyway.
We probably launched the brand at a slightly tougher time in some ways, and that's just that kind of post-pandemic. So during the pandemic, sales of whiskey were sort of through the roof, and it was a really great time for everybody. But in a way, I think Gordon and I are quite grateful that we launched just after that, although the market is quite challenging. I think if we can continue to make it work in a challenging market, we know where we stand, and we can build the brand in a healthy way. Which
which
is
success
really
is not just a fluke.
Yeah, exactly. And we know what, in terms of purchasing and production planning and things, that is more stable instead of an inflated market. So
Nice. Well, that's a really, really solid blend.
Thank you.
That is a damn fine whiskey. 46 unchill filtered.
Everything unchill filtered,
Nice.
natural colour, 46 minimum. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I always laugh. I don't know if you noticed. Whiskies in here, especially when they're more on the yellow hue because of the green walls, kind of look slightly green. It's like looking at the colour, like, it's swampy.
it's
and he's a repaint.
Yeah, it's not what I would put on the nose colour, swampy.
They need a white piece of paper I can hold up behind it. Yeah. Actually, the light. There we go. That's much better.
There you go.
Yeah, that's lovely. And a great way to start as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It lays a solid foundation of the kind of, like, I mean, there's hints of the playfulness in here. There's the hints of the creativity, especially with the use of, cognac casks and red wine casks and things. But you've tamed it down and made it approachable.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So where does track 2 take us, then?
So I would actually suggest we go to track 3
Track
next.
3, all right. I like it.
So we did track 2.
We're putting the iPod on shuffle.
Yeah, no, exactly. Track 2 was our peated expression. I don't know why we didn't actually think of making that track 3 in terms of tasting order, but so we'll go.
Perfect. They were already in the right order.
Yeah, absolutely. But,
nice. Alrighty.
So track 3, Purple Haze, we're going more our heavily sherry matured whiskey. So really, you'll immediately see sort of dark colour. And we found, like, today, sherry matured whiskies become a really popular style within the Scotch whisky industry. People like the dark colour, they like the sweet flavours. Sometimes I feel like as an industry we're maybe overly playing into that trend, and just for my personal taste, that occasionally we get quite thin spirit in very, very sweet Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, and it can become quite one-dimensional, quite dominated by the PX. So when we were working on this blend, we were quite conscious of that and wanted to create something that was very well balanced. So
thin spirit. Craig Ellicky is not that.
Exactly. So we were really focusing on quite heavy, full-bodied, rich, robust styles of spirit. So the Craig Ellicky in particular, really meaty, heavy, full-bodied, can stand up well to the sherry cask. So nice. Craig Ellicky, Oloroso, Balmenach, such an underrated distillery, like a really fantastic distillery in Pedro Jimenez, and then we've got Invergordon in ex-sherry barrel. So that one wasn't re-racked, actually. That was one of the original casks. The finishing time on the Craig Ellicky and the Balmenach was over 2 years, I think.
Nice. That's solid.
Yeah, and so the Craig Ellicky 12 years old, Balmenach 13, and Invergordon 19.
Nice. Yeah, and this is the one that I've actually had. Our club actually tasted this last year. It scored 88 with our members, which is a very respectable score for this style of whiskey. And the thing that I remember really liking about it and thinking that, I can't believe it's taken me this long to try the rest of the range, to be honest. I'm slightly embarrassed. But the thing that really struck me was that it wasn't just sherry for sherry's sake. It, like, to borrow the whole music thing, sherry was an instrument that was part of an orchestra. Yeah. There was still other flavors happening going alongside it, and those big worm tubby kind of whiskies really help with carrying that sherry flavor. Yeah. You need a big sort of, you need that big bass section in the orchestra. Exactly. Without it, the violins just sound flat. Yeah.
Nice. But so, I mean, the whole sort of sherry matured whiskey is such an interesting trend within Scotch whiskey as well.
Yeah, my theory on that is that it's a lot of people who are coming to Scotch from other spirits, especially like American whiskies, that are expecting a big, bold flavour and aren't used to the complexities of something that's a little bit more balanced. Yeah. Because they either go for heavy sherry or heavy peat, and it's like, whoa, they're looking for a punch in the face.
It's funny you say that, because actually even on the peated side for us, like I love peated whiskey, but I don't particularly enjoy when it becomes like this competition who can produce the most peated whiskey, the highest ppm and things. And I think we're, again, on the peated, anything we do, we're looking for balance.
Nice. And it's interesting the ways that balance can come across, because I've had some ridiculously heavily peated whiskies which they have managed to balance. One of my favorite heavily peated whiskies, I think, was 8.2 the Octomore, where they used red wine casks to balance it. Yeah. And that worked really well.
It worked. Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool.
It was still a lot of flavour. A bit much, but it worked. And then some of the, like, the 0.1s and the 0.3s where it's just ex-bourbon and they haven't really done much else to it, can be a very aggressive whiskey.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that as well. Sometimes I actually think the sweeter wine cask combined with smoke can really balance quite well together. So,
but you just need something else to stand up to it.
For sure.
But I also really personally enjoy smoke, again, when it's surrounded by other things. I like lightly peated whiskies. One of my favourites with distilleries of all time is Ardmore. Cool. And I just love that, like, inclusion of everything else that goes around
Absolutely,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty, so Purple Haze.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out whether we're allowed to do, is it 3 seconds legally of the track that we could play over the top of this as we go
I don't
on
know.
a loop?
I'll turn a blind eye to it. Nice, thanks.
No worries.
That's great. Thank you. But again, it's one of the nice parts about being a blending house as well, in terms of the diversity of style that we can have within the range. So, I mean, track 1 and 3 are completely different styles, and the whole weight of the whiskey, the mouthfeel, the body is totally different. So
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, especially at the very beginning of like your journey as a blending house, it's going to be really hard to pinpoint a house style. But especially when all of the whiskeys so far have been so different,
Yeah.
like, would you say that you have a house style that you're aiming for, or is your house style variety?
In some ways, I would say variety. I mean, when we get on to looking at the core range, I think that's really what we're wanting to build the brand around, sort of focusing on 3 different styles within the core range, and then going forward, the limited editions are a chance to be expressive, innovative, look at completely different things. But in terms of like a sort of DNA that runs through each of the expressions, I would say not really. I'd always look for a degree of complexity and mouthfeel that we're looking to achieve through the natural colour and on-chill filter, and and I mean, the minimum requirement that we kind of look for within any of our whiskies is that the final blend is more interesting and exciting than any one of the individual component casts. That's like
because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. That's like our minimum expectation. So always looking for that depth across the range as well. Yeah.
Nice, solid. And I feel like that's more of a thing with more modern blending houses as well. Like if you look at the old school guys, like as I mentioned before, Shivers and Doers, like there's not that much difference between a Chivas 21 and a Chivas 12. Like you can feel the evolution of it. And even with Doers, when they're doing their double like 27 and stuff, you know, it's all fits within a certain category. But a lot of the newer guys, they're just being playful. I like to see that.
Yeah, exactly. And we almost have a slightly different approach. Like for your Chivas Regal, Ballantyne's, Johnny Walker, the consistency in the range that these guys can achieve is unbelievable. I mean, really, really impressive through a period of time. But even for us, when we get to the core range, like I would say consistency is important, but each time we bottle, there will be different nuances from batch to batch. And we quite enjoy that. It's almost like for us, each time we bottle, we want to bottle the best version we possibly can of that whiskey. So if you have hit some really interesting standout casks, we don't want to shy away from using them out of fear that you won't be able to recreate that flavor profile. So I almost look at the core range as going on a journey more similar to that of a single malt. When you look at some of the single malts on the market, a 12-year-old from any distillery, really, if you tried that 12-year-old in 2017 or you tried it today, you would usually know it's the same distillery, a very similar whiskey, but not the same, and it's gone on a bit of a journey.
It's always a little bit similar to the last one, but
it's just evolved, and I think that's kind of how I look at us as a blending house, and even the core range that will go on a bit of a journey. But as I said, for some of the bigger players, the consistency these guys achieve is really impressive.
Well, and I think a big part of that consistency is most of them own a suite of their own distilleries, right?
Exactly.
And I assume you guys don't own a distillery.
We don't. No.
Is that a dream one day, do you think, or is that more of a restriction to you?
It's a really interesting question. I think, like in the past, is something that would have been very appealing. But honestly, I think within the single malt side of the market and things, there's enough going on there, and there's plenty of variety for enthusiasts, for consumers, and I don't think it's something that we think we can bring anything terribly fresh and exciting to. Whereas within blending and trying to put our stamp on that category and move the dial there, it really gives us energy and passion, and it's what we want to be doing. So even like, I think a slightly safer bet for Gordon and I when we started a company probably would have been to go into independent bottling, in that we have a good network to source casks, we have a good understanding of the wood management, we have quite a good network in terms of route to market and where to sell and things, and there's a model there that we know would work. But at the same time, there's a lot of independent bottlers out there, and I genuinely don't believe there's much that we could add to that category.
Well, it's also, you don't get to be creative.
Oh, exactly. That's it. And
Right.
I honestly think, like, as I said, from a business sense, it probably would be a slightly safer play. But in terms of what we really want to be doing and what we're passionate about, what gives us energy, the blending side, I honestly find really, really exciting. So
Yeah.
I think...
Because I've seen that, like, a lot of independent bottlers, like, not the newer ones, but the ones that have been around for a little while, are they're putting more emphasis on blends these days, which is interesting.
But when you look at it, it's like you mentioned Compass Box, who are a big inspiration to us. I mean, they've been so creative and probably ahead of their time in some sense, in that they started sort of 20 years ago.
And just simple things like highlighting the grain component, like hedonism, like the fact that was the first ever blended grain, and it wasn't until the year 2000. I don't know what's weirder, that or the fact that it was the first ever whiskey with a woman on the label. Like,
but the interesting thing is as well, like they started 20 years ago, but nobody really has played in that space since. You're right, some of the independent bottlers are turning to blending and things, but there's nobody been purely focused on small batch blending, creativity, transparency. So we think hopefully there's something exciting that we can add to that category. So,
and I think you already are.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear.
I think it's a really good approach. Has everything you've done so far been strictly blend, or have you done any blended malts?
Everything blend so far. So we almost have this kind of philosophy in a way that we want to remove restriction as far as possible. So although you get great whiskies within different categories, you think a single cask is obviously quite restrictive. Single malt, regional blended malts, everything is sort of putting a barrier to what you can do in some way. So we almost think by going blended whiskey is removing as many of those barriers as possible. And then even if you're going blended whiskey instead of blended Scotch whiskey, then you're removing further barriers into cross-border as well. So
it does seem like you're very much going flavour first, and everything else is then based on that flavour. You have an idea. I don't know how you build the whiskies, but in my mind, I imagine you have an idea of what you want it to taste like, and then you build it based on that.
Exactly. So we'd usually have a sort of an idea of desired flavour profile. We would look to our inventory, what we have in stock, what kind of distillate it is, what we would expect from that spirit, what age it is, has it been re-racked, what cask has it been, how long has it been in that cask, and what we would expect from that. And then it's a process of sampling, narrowing down, and working on different combinations. But I think we usually have a kind of desired end point, but sometimes you follow the whiskies as well, and that is unpredictable how some of these whiskies will combine, how they will respond to dilution, to water being added, and it can be quite exciting just to see what direction you go in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned like the region side of it as well, because like I'm always been intrigued by the whole Douglas Lang regional malt thing. Because like I don't think regions really matter in terms of flavour anymore. There's more exceptions to the rule than there are the rule.
I agree. It's certainly been removed a lot. But I mean, Douglas Lang, I think, are a great company as well. And I mean, from the independent bottling, the blended regional malts, I think they're making great whiskey. And I mean, the likes of Big Pete, when they first released it, was...
But like, I do feel like it's an unnecessary handcuff.
Yeah,
like,
no,
I mean,
I understand.
It works for marketing, but like, I think Big Pete would be maybe better if it had a little bit of the Chagan. You know?
Yeah, no, I completely.
Yeah. But yeah, they do well with the concept.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I said, track 3, very different style of whiskey to track 1. Very full-bodied, heavy style, and not as sweet as you would maybe expect from some sherry cask matured whiskies. You almost get this dark chocolate, slightly drier, slightly spicier.
Yeah.
Some of these cinnamon, orange peel, and then into some of the sweeter notes as well. But I think the Oloroso comes through more than the PX, which is really interesting.
There's a lot of sherried whiskies I've had in my time that remind me of like mince pies, the Christmas things. But it's almost entirely from the filling. This, I feel like I'm getting mince pies with the pastry and the brandy butter. Like, it's a full mince pie experience.
Sounds great. Yeah, but as I said, compared to track 1, like both, I really love both whiskies, but the mouthfeel is just so different. It's a longer finish and much more viscous, much heavier.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that oiliness is coming from that Craigellachie.
Yeah, absolutely. For blending purposes, honestly, Craig Ellicky sherry casks, I love working with. Really really great.
Nice.
It's,
All right, well let's go for some peat.
Yeah, nice.
I'm intrigued by track 2.
I guess on the track 3 as well, the name Purple Haze didn't have quite as much of a story as track 1, other than I think Jimi Hendrix with the sherry cask is a really nice pairing. But I always really get curious to hear what different people from different countries and things would choose to listen to when drinking our whiskies. So if anybody has any pairing suggestions, anything, fire them our way. Nice. I'm always curious.
It's a great concept, and it's actually something we've been doing here. We have a series that we've just started of single casks with a local distillery, Phillips, which it's kind of. Hopefully I'm not treading on your toes too much. Ours is called Mixtape. And it's kind of a similar kind of idea. Each one is based on a genre. So the first one was psych rock, and it was matured in a shipping container in a rosé wine cask. So it's 70% alcohol. Wow. It's just absolutely just.
That's a cool concept, though. No, I love that. Yeah, really.
All right, so track 2. So one thing I want to mention about track 3 as well is the amount of times I've accidentally called it Purple Rain.
It's funny, we had that with my wife as well. She's from Norway, and her family they looked at it and thought, "Oh, Purple Rain, I love Purple Rain." It's like no, purple haze. Like, oh, maybe don't know that one as much.
It's objectively a better song in my opinion. Nice. I love the color choice kind of works really well with the
thanks
selection as well. Like it feels like peachy. It feels like rhubarb and currants, you know. And this one, I'm expecting just from the label to be a little coastal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. But it's quite cool actually. Even the design work that we did on this, we worked with an agency in Glasgow called Thirstcraft, but
cool.
It's a really really cool agency, but it was actually started by one of my really close friends at university. So when we decided to start Turntable, we never really went and spoke to a range of different potential agencies to work with. We just kind of picked up the phone to a friend and worked together, and they've done an amazing job as a company. They work with like Brooklyn Beer, Remy Cointreau, Bruichladdich and things, but I think they really enjoyed the chance to go back to a startup and be really creative as well.
Well, and on the creative side of things, like you can't underestimate the importance of having a relationship with them. Like they already know who you are, and your personality is passed on through the brand. So
and we kind of thought as well it's a chance for us to. Obviously, there's so much history and tradition within the Scotch whisky industry, which we love, and that runs through the branding and packaging, and it makes perfect sense. But we're obviously a relatively new company without the 100 years of heritage and things to play into. So we thought there's a nice opportunity for us to be a bit more modern and colourful, bold, try and stand out on the shelf.
I like it.
See if I can.
There it is.
There you go.
I thought there wasn't any perforation. I just couldn't see it. No worries. I just sat here fiddling around.
They are quite tricky.
There we go.
Yeah.
But if I can get to it.
Well sealed for shipping though.
Oh, absolutely. You don't want it leaking.
Exactly.
There's a couple of distilleries here that use those Vinalock lids.
Okay.
And the amount of times I've just seen bartenders like trying to just pull them straight off and just whiskey going everywhere.
Yeah.
Oof. Alrighty, I'm in. I managed it. Almost.
We'll get there. No worries.
I'm in. All right, we're good. We're on it. So, track 3. This is track 2. Third whiskey, track 2.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry, I'm confusing things here. Yeah.
It's all right. I mean, spring so far.
Yeah.
I want to say. Christmas.
Yeah, probably
right.
Autumn, winter.
Autumn, winter.
Yeah.
I wonder where this one's going to land.
I mean, it could be different areas, to be honest. So far, as I mentioned, peated whiskey, our approach is like we really want the smoke and the peat to be a main element of the blend, but we don't want it to be only smoke and overwhelming in that. So,
the first thing I notice here is it's only one peated whiskey.
Exactly. So 40% coming from Caolila, but the other 60% is unpeated. So, and really sort of focusing on fresh American oak casks as well. So we have some Ben Rinnes in there, Cameron Bridge, and then is it Invergordon is the last?
Yeah,
Invergordon. And we're...
Invergordon's the one that's up north, isn't it?
It's that's White Mackay. Yeah. But as I said, really looking for a balanced peated whiskey here. I mentioned most of the malt whiskies we use are sort of between 10 and 15. The exception in the range so far would be the Caolila here, which is 8 years old. I sometimes feel
you want that with peated whiskey.
Oh, exactly. I sometimes feel 8 years for peated whiskey is quite a sweet point, and it's still got that freshness and vibrancy to really come through. And I think the first notes that you'll get on this whiskey is that Caolila sort of campfire smoke. Slightly salty, but not as medicinal or not as much iodine as you might get from some other peated whiskies. But really, really love Caolila. And then when after the first taste, which you do get that sort of fiery nature, it softens into more of the American oak, the toffee, the caramel, the vanilla, the sort of green apples. But a really cool whiskey.
It's amazing how this is only 40% Caolila, but all I'm getting on the nose is like, hey, it's a Caolila. I know this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that bacon wrapped scallop.
Yeah, as I said, the second taste is really interesting because it does soften on the second taste, I would say.
Nice.
Yeah. In terms of the musical pairing for this one, we went with the Prodigy Firestarter. So we always think the Prodigy is kind of cool. They sort of like to do things differently and two fingers up to authority, and we think it ties in quite well. And obviously Firestarter sort of tying in with the flavour profile you'd expect from the whiskey.
Yeah, and like it works kind of two ways because the primary element of this is the peat, the smoke, but the secondary element to me is the fresh wood, the virgin oak.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to start a fire, that's a good way to do it.
Nice.
That's lovely. But I love that you didn't just make all of them peated. Like that's. It feels like the cheating way right now to make a popular blended whiskey is just to make it peated.
Add some peat.
It's especially, I don't know about back home, but here in North America, it's very much people are looking for a hint of peat in a blend.
Yeah.
If you can get a decently priced whiskey that is got that smoke to it, people are all over it.
You're right, and on many blends you'd be even sort of 3% peat and things just to give it a lift in some way. But and I mean the truth is as well with peated whiskey, it can be more accessible and approachable at a younger age than many non-peated whiskies are. So that it works quite well at a younger age. Yeah.
Well, it gives it complexity without time.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you have any preference in style of whiskey for like just personal preference for yourself?
I think I'm a bit like you guys. I like variety.
Yeah,
nice. I've got like 140 whiskies at home. Like I
can't
choose.
Yeah, it depends on the environment, occasion. Yeah,
totally. I mean, I definitely started with Scottish whiskey. Well, actually, I started with Irish whiskey because my whiskey journey started when I was persuaded to become a singer for an Irish folk band at my high school.
Amazing.
I'm obviously not Irish. I've actually stepped foot in Ireland once.
Yeah.
And so, I had to, we're singing about Irish whiskey. I guess I better drink some Jameson.
That's really cool.
But then, I went up to university in Scotland, worked at a folk music pub, and got soon told that not only is Scottish folk music better, but Scottish whiskey's better too. That's not me saying that. That's the people who I was working with telling me
Scots.
that. Yeah. I'm not saying they're wrong. They're probably not. Especially at the time, Irish whiskey's come a long way in the last 20 years. But 20 years ago, what was the
what is it? It's changed a lot.
It's basically just Bushmills and Jameson. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah. But really seeing a renaissance there as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, music and whiskey literally went hand in hand to me. Like, it's how both of my journeys started together in that, which is fun. Yeah. But in terms of personal preference, like I say, I love variety. I love playfulness. I gave up a long time ago trying to find the best whiskey because it doesn't exist. I'm more interested in finding the next interesting whiskey. What's next? What's people doing? What's fun? What boundaries are being pushed? And also, how are people managing to create an old school, like perfectly balanced traditional sort of Scottish whiskey in a new way? Yeah, and that's what excites me.
It's funny you quite often in the industry get the question, what is your personal favorite whiskey? And it's It's a hard question.
It really
to answer.
is.
Yeah, no,
I've got like a top 5 distilleries in
Yeah.
Scotland that I
Okay.
have ready to go just in case people ask me. So like Ardmore, Clynelish, Tierninich.
Nice.
Oh God, then it gets hard.
It's funny, like even
Ben Romer,
yeah, nice.
Lefroy, I guess.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. It's funny, like when people ask me, I'd probably go down the nostalgic route, and the whiskey for both Gordon and I, we kind of grew up with in the house would have been Old Pulteney 12. So my dad worked in the industry for a long time, and he was with Inverhouse for many years, and Old Pulteney was just the whiskey that was always there, and I always kind of feel a connection to that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Pulteney was a favourite behind our bar as well.
Nice
in
one.
New York. Although the whiskey that really cemented the fact that I actually like the drink, not just the culture around it, was our bar whiskey back in Edinburgh, which was Black Bottle.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Love a good Black
really
Bottle.
cool. Yeah,
It's changed a little in the last few years.
There's
so-
some really cool whiskies going into that.
Actually, after we shut the camera off, if you want, I actually have a bottle of 1970s Black Bottle tucked away down there. If you want to try
Fantastic.
it.
Yeah,
it's pretty
absolutely.
good.
It's just another Wednesday morning. Yeah, no, that sounds amazing.
Lovely. So the exciting thing about this little sort of introductory series, track 1, 2, and 3, I guess it's an EP. Yeah. It's an extended play.
Yeah, exactly.
Of Turntable is that they are on the shelf already here at the Strath, and you can pick them up right now. Regular price is $126, and the sale price right now, because they are being featured, is $113.40 for all of our Whiskey Folk members. And the excitement doesn't finish there, because although I'm recording this video in early September right now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's not going to go live until October, because at the same time that this video is going live, you will be able to come into the store and actually try these whiskies. These are our drop-in drams, our sample whiskies right now here at the Strath. So for the next 2 months, you can come in and try a sample, and I'm going to let you choose which one they get for free and which ones they have to pay for. So one of them you can come in and try for free. If people could only try one of these, which one would you want them to try?
Let's go the Purple Haze. Let's
Purple
go
Haze?
Let's go the
Nice.
Sherry Mature.
All right, so you can come and try Purple Haze for free, and then for a couple of bucks you can try the other two as well. Or if you're a Strath Premium member, it's all included in your subscription. You can come try all three. That's perfectly allowed. And I look forward to seeing what our members think of these as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's an important thing to do because we need to sell these whiskies so that we can make room on our shelves for these whiskies. Because I'm excited. I love it when companies come out with a core range, because it shows not just what they can do, but how they want themselves to be presented. And I don't know if you've managed to try it yet. One of the most exciting things that happened in independent bottlers recently is Boutique coming out with an actual core range that's always available. And that is a phenomenal range of whiskies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love the idea of having a core range because it gives you a starting off point to not judge, but compare other offerings to. Like, it's the same with Compass Box. I mean, they have a core range. Yeah. Like, I feel like you can't fully understand like the hedonism, the muse, if you haven't tried the regular hedonism. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to really getting to know Turntable now with what you want to be represented with.
Exactly. I mean, the core range, that's how we want to build the brand going forward around these three expressions. And then limited editions, we can keep things fresh and exciting, innovate in different ways. Mm-hmm. But the core range is a big focus for us. It's kind of interesting as well. Like the limited editions, not that they're easier, but in a way,
logistically they're easier. Well, you don't have to guarantee that you're going to get the same whiskies again and again.
You're not thinking about recreating these at any stage. You're just trying to create the best version of the whiskey you possibly can, and once it's bottled, that's it. Whereas obviously the core range brings a lot more planning, and that is part of the industry. Gordon and I both love though is the long-term thinking in nature and the planning ahead, and it's sort of thinking where we can take these whiskies on a long-term journey and how we can make sure that we can grow the brand and have the stock available to do that well.
And that long-term planning, I mean, a lot of newer companies come into this and don't have any kind of long-term plan going in. It's so important to have that. I mean, if you look at the true success stories in the independently bottled sort of category, Gordon MacPhail is the big one. And they are where they are now because of that forward planning.
Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned Douglas Lane earlier and things, but some of the stock they'll have in their portfolio is unbelievable. Yeah. But
is it easier now, by the way? Because this is a question I've asked a couple of independent bottlers, and some of them have kind of hinted that maybe some contracts got swapped because G&M obviously aren't buying whiskey anymore.
Which they're not. I don't know if that's really opened the door massively to other independent bottlers. It's quite difficult to tell at this stage. I mean, it has been a relatively difficult time for buying stock because the industry has been steadily booming and increasing, and everybody's been increasing production capacity, building more warehouses, and in general the prices of trading stock have been high. But now that it's a little more challenging in the industry, you're seeing more availability, and it's all that secondary market is always really, really interesting.
But the big thing, of course, with G&M is that they bought all of their stuff as new make.
Exactly.
And from what I understand, a lot of distilleries don't really like to do that much.
Well, I think as well now that G&M have the Cairn and Ben Romack, the expectation would be that there would be some trade and back and forth, and possibly they don't want to do that, so it maybe changes that conversation a little as well.
Totally. And they still have, obviously, because they bought it all as new make, they still have a warehouse full of stuff that's going to be eventually...
When this press release came out saying G&M are sort of stepping away from independent bottling, I was like, maybe in 70 years' time they are.
We're still going to have Spey malts for another 30 years.
Plenty of stock.
But the reason I bring them up is because you mentioned when you were talking about the stocks that you guys have, that you have got some stuff as new make spirit. Is that so that you're making a calculation now of what you'll need for your core range going forward?
I think, yes, in some ways, and in some ways you're just looking long-term planning. What areas do we have gaps in the range? But ideally, we would, with each year that passes, I would like us to be buying younger and younger whiskey and moving towards new filling contracts where we have full control over the wood management, which would be really exciting. But at the same time, we're releasing whiskies that are 15, 20, 25 years old. So it's not like you can get there overnight. But ideally, we're always looking for interesting availability, variety of distillates, good quality, good value. But in terms of the long-term planning, going towards fillings of new make, 3-year-old and things, it lets you lay out a path for the future as well, which is quite exciting.
Nice. All right, well, let's crack in. What do you recommend we start with?
Let's go to Paradise Funk.
Paradise Funk.
Yeah, so even actually on the naming on the core, we sort of moved away from specific tracks and song connections, so we went more sort of 2 words. The first word to try and capture the flavour description, and the second word to try and tie into a style of music. So the thought with Paradise Funk is paradise, although it's not a flavour, trying to kind of capture this feeling of tropical fruits, vanilla, caramel, toffee, and then funk was this sort of ever-changing, unpredictable style of music. And I think this whiskey, the longer it sits in the glass, it's always changing. It's really interesting. The more oxygen that interacts, it really moves, which is interesting.
That's one of my favourite things to explain to new whiskey drinkers, how when you invest in a bottle of whiskey, you're not actually investing in 26 ounces of the same thing. You're going to get 26 different experiences every single time you drink it. Yeah,
exactly. I should point out on the core range as well, we don't put the blend breakdowns on the label and on the pack, and that's basically, we're always trying to be as transparent as we possibly can, but I mentioned with the limited editions, we bottle them once, and once they're gone, they're gone. The core range we'll bottle again and again, and we need some flexibility to be able to alter percentages, alter
and swap out distilleries if you need to.
Depending on
you can't get any Clynelish right now, stick some tea in it in there. It's basically the same. It'll do.
Exactly that. But we put the full breakdowns on our website.
Nice.
So and we'll keep that up to date with each of the batches.
Is there a code for the batch?
We do have there's not on the bottles, but we do have sort of bottling date that we will be able to tie it into. But nice. It was always sort of we'll cross that bridge when we come to it kind of thing. But I think we're getting there now. But But so I mean, Paradise Funk in some ways was based on track one, the Joy Discovery Invention, but it is definitely quite a different whiskey in that there is more focus on the American oak, on the virgin oak. So we're using a lot of Ben Rinnes whiskey, Blair Athol whiskey.
Nice.
There is some unnamed Speyside as well, but again, there is some cognac cask influence, but a lot of Chinkapin, a lot of virgin oak. There's also some Anok whiskey in there as well. But I would say a bit more intense on the vanilla, the toffee, that sort of peppery spice coming through from the Chinkapin as well. And again, you get the orchard fruits, but the longer the whiskey sits in glass, the more of the tropical fruits come out from some of those older grain whiskies as well. But it takes a little more time to open up than the track one. But I would say slightly heavier on the mouthfeel and a little more intense with those spices. Yeah.
Nice. It's always interesting going back to like this style of whiskey after it's been sat in the glass for a little while. Like going back and smelling it now, it's so much sweeter. It's like powdered donuts.
Yeah, exactly. And the Paradise Funk definitely does the same. Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Ooh, I wonder where that's coming from. There's a really nice sort of, one of the things I look for in this style of whiskey is I love it when you can actually taste like grain in a sense, like there's that biscuitiness kind of going on underneath, like almost like a digestive or something.
So the grain coming from North British on this one, but we do have an unnamed Speyside making up 30% of the Paradise Funk in the whole range so far. That's been.
And there's only so many Speysides that sell to blending houses that don't like their name being dropped.
The only thing I'd say on that is not who you'd expect it to be.
Oh, okay.
So it's genuinely not.
Is it a bourbon cask?
It is. Yes, it is bourbon cask. Yeah, but I think we respect everybody's wishes. So if somebody does say to us, like, please remain unnamed, we will remain unnamed, and we're still buying from them, so there is continuity there going forward. But I kind of hope that as we develop a reputation, and we picked up some really good accolades recently and things, that people become more and more comfortable with us naming their whiskies. And as I said, like I really like the idea of we enhance the reputation of each component as well, and encourage people to go and check out those whiskies also. So that's
there are a few distilleries that I'm always intrigued, like, why don't you want people knowing? Because like frankly the independently bottled stuff is often better than your official bottled stuff.
It's just it's a tradition thing, and it's a mindset in the industry. So we mentioned New World Distilleries, how we've done some cross-border blending and have some plans in place for that. I would say every New World distillery we've spoken to and sort of pitched the project to in a way, every one of them have said to me, yeah, that sounds really cool, we want to do it, but only if you name us. I think, it's no problem. It's okay. But, and it's the same with some of the newer distilleries and things, but the traditional side of the Scotch whisky industry is usually just brand protective, and be careful with that. But I agree with
protecting the house style, I think.
Exactly. But I think people are opening up to that idea a bit more.
I'm not saying that this is or isn't, and it's not my guess at all. But like the one distillery that often comes up, especially with the SNWS, because they don't like the fact that they were distillery number one, was Glenfarclas. And they often don't like it because, well, their house style is everything sherry cask all the time. So if you ever see a Glenfarclas in a bourbon cask, they're like, that's not us. That's not what we do. Yeah. So I can kind of understand it from like it's a divergence from the house style.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I frankly prefer Glenfarclas in a bourbon cask.
Sorry,
George.
No, Glenfarclas is great in general, man. It's a really good distillery.
It is, yeah. You don't stay open for that many decades without.
I mean, you talk about stock portfolio and things. I think theirs is hard to compare to be honest. It's quite something.
Didn't someone recently crash a car into the distillery to steal a bunch of their stock?
Is that right? Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Beautiful. Paradise Funk.
Nice.
I know you say these ones aren't named after songs, but I can't help but notice.
Do you know it's funny on the next whiskey, which is our heavily sherry matured whiskey in the core range, we call Bittersweet Symphony, and it was yes, it pairs well with the song by The Verve, but we were almost kept trying to look for a different name because we weren't intentionally going for songs on this, but it honestly, it captured the whiskey too well to not.
Fair enough.
So this on the bittersweet side, it's that kind of really dark chocolate, not as sweet as you'd expect it to be. Bittersweet is the perfect one-word description flavor-wise.
Yeah.
And if you're saying bittersweet and looking for a musical reference, how do you
how
not
do
go
you not? Yeah.
symphony? But even with symphony, sort of think it's kind of what we're trying to be about as a blending house. I mentioned the minimum expectation for us is that the final blend is more interesting and exciting than any one of the component single cask whiskies. And I think that is exactly a symphony in some ways.
Absolutely.
So it's, yeah.
And have you had any of the artists contact you?
We've not. We actually, because I mentioned the track one, the sort of Biffy Clyro, they were actually at the same school as Gordon and I. So,
nice.
we sent them some samples and things as well. So that was kind of cool. But I've got no connection to the Verve or Jimi Hendrix would be quite difficult.
Well, that would be send them a bottle. They'll probably appreciate it.
But
nice.
But yeah, it's. So there's definitely a similarity between this and track 3, probably more so than any of the others so far, in that the component whiskies, we have Craig Ellichie again, but this time both in Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez. Cool. There's Balmenic Pedro Jimenez, there's Blair Athol Virgin Oak, and North British Virgin Oak. Nice. So that's kind of the breakdown for this one.
I forgot to ask, are these all 46 again?
Yeah, the core range all at 46. So we've just been working on a couple of, or we've got a few new releases, or track 4, 5, and 6 that we've been working on, and we'll do one at cask strength for the first time. And nice. I think that's really exciting. It's something you don't usually see in the world of blended whiskey so much. No. But
even the SNWS, which kind of were famously the big people for cask strength for so long, even their blends are 50%.
Yeah. But no, so that's quite exciting, and I think the core range sitting at 46 is exactly where we want it to be.
Yeah.
In future, on some of the limited editions, we might play around with different strengths a little as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been disappointed with the concentration of flavors. Like at 46, these all sit really well. The only reason really to have something at cask strength is so that people can choose what ABV they want it at.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't want that stress,
Yeah.
You just want to crack open a bottle of whiskey and drink it. You don't have to worry about going through the whole adding drops of water and there's something to be said about keeping it simple
at the
sometimes.
strength you want it to be at. Yeah, I think
and 46, this works well for this style of whiskey.
And for the core range, we still wanted to we want to attract a wide audience, but we want the whiskies to be accessible as well. And when going the core range, if we went at 52, 53 kind of thing, you're maybe cutting that off a little. But it's interesting when we first kind of released the brand, I almost thought the target in some way would be towards a kind of new generation of whiskey drinker, whereas open-minded, flavour first, and maybe a slightly younger audience. And we've found actually in the UK and Europe, where the brand has been available a little longer than Canada, that we've landed very well with the whiskey enthusiasts and the kind of whiskey geeks and connoisseurs, which has been really good. And I think a lot of that is down to the transparency, the blend breakdowns, but also I think the markets just now, I think people now, maybe not more than ever, but certainly more than in the last 5-6 years, people are really looking for quality at the right price, the right value, and hopefully we're positioning ourselves at the right point. And we're really not looking for our whiskies to be sitting on a shelf and purely collectibles and things. I want people opening them, sharing them, tasting them. So yeah,
that's one of my favourite phrases. I still can't figure out who originally said it, but it's not whiskey until it's shared.
That's nice. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly that.
Nice.
But yeah, as I said, definitely a similarity to the track 3. I would say maybe a slightly sweeter and brighter. Some of those Virgin Oak casks coming through from Blair Athol as well. A slightly higher percentage of PX compared as well. But the mouthfeel, the body, is quite similar. That kind of oily nature that really stands up well to the sherry cask.
Mm-hmm.
But a little sweeter, a little more of the vanillas, the dried fruits, the dates, the figs, maybe hints of coffee in there as well. But
In the nicest way possible, it reminds me of Vimto.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I'm not sure if it actually reminds me of actually Vimto or just my nostalgic memory for Vimto, because you can't really get it over here.
It's funny, I was in Vancouver yesterday and showing the whiskies, and somebody said to me in a complimentary way, it was like, oh, it's kind of got that soy sauce nature, and I was like, I've never heard that before, but it's an interesting one. But
I'm a big fan of the whiskey asterisk,
yeah.
Sometimes when you have to describe a whiskey, you have to put the asterisk and say, but in a good way.
Yeah.
It tastes like asphalt, but in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was working at Ben Riach and Glendronach and things, we had one of the guys, the brand ambassador at the time, Stuart Buchanan. You might have met. He's been over a few times. Really, really cool guy. But he would write some of the tasting notes sometimes, and there's some great ones there. Honestly, like I loved all the leather books and things. It's great. Yeah.
Liquid nostalgia. That's what we're drinking.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you work much with Glenglassaugh when you were with them?
Yeah, I mean, I loved Glenglassaugh, but it was maybe 3 years or so. So that distillery. So I mean, Billy, Wayne, and Jeff. They started with Ben Riach Distillery in 2004, and then acquired Glendronach in 2008, and Glenglassaugh I think was 2013, and then the company was sold in 2015. So I was probably, and I stayed through 1 year of the takeover with Brown Forman as well. So I probably worked with Glenglassaugh for about 3 years. Nice. So a really interesting distillery. I mean, amazing new make spirit, and
so
it was unusual because it was closed from 86 until 2008. So you had this really weird position that you could try post 2008 whiskey or pre 86. So you had like, at the time I was there, you had like 6-year-old, 7-year-old. Obviously, they're now releasing 10 and 12 and things. But at the time I was there, it was sort of 6 and 7 or 30. And it's like, it was really, really bizarre.
That was like one of the more eye-opening moments in my career about a decade ago. One of the local whiskey clubs, the Companions of the Quake, which is like a whiskey dinner club here in Canada, they bottled an octave of Glenglassaugh. Nice. And it didn't say Glenglassaugh anywhere on the front. The only place it said was underneath the barcode on the back, distilled at Glenglassaugh. It's weird. Yeah. It was like this little 4-year-old octave cask. Wow. And I tried it at a tasting, side by side next to, I think it was a 36-year-old Glenglassaugh, and it was better. I was like, how?
The new make spirit was really, really good. I mean, I think the fermentation time was up at like 120 hours and things, and the new make spirit was really interesting. Yeah.
But like they seem to have the same kind of idea that you're going for here. It's flavor first, everything else is secondary. Like the age at the end of the day doesn't matter if the flavor is what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I almost think for us going forward with Turntable, that I hope through time and reputation that people come to expect that our whiskies aren't really 3-year-old, 4-year-old, although there's non-age statement on them. It's just because there's the variety of ages. But I mean, in general, everything we're doing is over 10 and going to sort of
it would be a disservice to put a big 8 on the contract too, right?
And it's more like, even some people would argue with me, there's more transparency putting the age of the youngest whiskey, which is true. I agree with that, but I almost think there's more confusion as well. And the expectation then is that the whiskey is 8 years old when.
If the people are looking for an 8-year-old whiskey, they're going to be disappointed.
It doesn't fully capture it. Yeah. So it's a tricky one. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Have you thought about going through the route like Compass Box has the secret way of finding out on the website?
So
the spider web.
I had this kind of idea that would be quite cool with the music tie-in, that maybe we create a playlist for each release where each song, the year relates to year of whiskey. But most of my musical taste is like 70s and 80s, and we don't have that many casks from the 70s and 80s right enough. But
maybe you could write it in code, like let's see if you can do it in like musical notation.
That
how many beats per minute is it? Nifty. Nice. All right, so last one. I'm guessing that if the trend is continuing, that this is going to be a different version of the
track 2 of the Firestarter. It is in that it's peated whiskey, but it's I would say this is the most different.
Okay.
This I would say is completely different from the Firestarter. But
intriguing.
yeah.
Yeah, the presentation of these models is outstanding.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
Like,
that's
really as
cool
a
to
design, like I did graphic design at school as well.
Really?
Like, that's
Nice.
more part of my other background. Like just the geometry and like the grid work and
Oh, that's good. No, that's great to hear. I love the work.
it's like
you
it
guys have done
feels
with
like
that.
very Swiss influenced in terms of the design, and that's peak.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's funny, even the logo, the sort of the TTs.
Yeah, the impossible T's.
Yeah, it's, I honestly find myself just losing myself looking at that.
Have you got the tattoo yet?
No, not yet.
It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. Very cool. But
So it looks darker.
absolutely.
More sherry?
Yeah, exactly. So
Or any sherry. I don't think there was any in this
no,
one.
none of that. That was all really about the American oak, the especially virgin cast. The smoke and riff is combination between peated whiskey and sherry cask matured. So really looking at this as a completely different whiskey, I would say, from the Firestarter. So the one thing in common is the peated element is coming from Caolila, but it's in a combination of ex-bourbon and ex-red wine casks.
Oh, fun.
And it's making up 29% of the blend, and then the other, or is it 28, 29, but the remaining 71, 72% is unpeated and mainly sherry cask matured. So Craig Ellicky, Pedro Jimenez, Anok, Pedro Jimenez, and North British Virgin Oak.
Nice.
But it's what you and I kind of spoke about earlier. This combination between peat and sweeter wine cask, sherry cask can be really, really interesting. So
if done well, it can just fall off the cliff.
I think on this one, it's again you definitely the first note coming through is that Caolila campfire smoke.
Yeah.
But even more so than the Firestarter, it really softens quite quickly into the.
Because the initial nose, it doesn't feel any less peated than the Firestarter.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I do love North British as a distillery, though. I mean, partially nostalgia-wise, my apartment when I was living in Edinburgh overlooked it, so I could actually see it from my window.
Really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. It's, I think in a way for Gordon and I, this is possibly the whiskey we're most proud of, and that neither of us has experience working for a distillery that is fully peat focused. Obviously, Ben Riach, now Glenallachie, Anok, and things like they do produce peated whiskey, but it's not the full focus. So it's an area we hadn't worked in too closely, but I think compared to what else is available on the market, this is a really interesting peated whiskey, and that combination between the smoke and the sherry cask and not overwhelming, really well balanced, and it can attract like quite a wide audience in terms of if people are not huge peat lovers but are curious about the category, it can be a really great introduction and gateway in there. But also we've found with the smokeheads, with the peat lovers, that they really appreciate the balance, and it's worked very well. So it's definitely a cool whiskey.
Yeah, so underneath the peat, I'm getting like this oily, like nutty oil, like almost walnutty kind of a thing.
Yeah, nice.
It's very, very pleasant.
And then even on the name for this one, the smoke and riff, the thought was obviously peat being the top note, the smoke, but then riff we sort of think about it as like a guitar riff being what gives a song its structure, and we think the smoke, the peat, is what gives this whiskey its structure, and then we build around that.
It's really long as well. Like it feels rolling. It feels like something is like got rhythm and repetition to it almost.
Yeah, for sure.
Like billowing smoke. Yeah. I can see why you're proud of this one.
Oh no, thank you.
It's very good.
We actually, it was quite funny. We'd never really entered any of the whiskies to competitions in the past. We'd sent out samples and things to a lot of whiskey writers, bloggers, and they'd always been really well received, which was great. But I had always been a bit skeptical about competitions. I always felt it was subjective, and you never really knew which way it would go. But we thought for the core range this year, we should probably enter a couple of the really reputable ones, the top ones. And so we entered them to two that we would view as very credible. We went with the IWSC, so the International Wine and Spirits Competition, and the Spirits Masters by the Spirits Business. And the three performed really, really well, which is cool. So the Bittersweet Symphony and the Smoke and Riff, they both won Masters medals, which
Nice.
is like the top accolade, and they were the only ones in the whole blended category to win that, which was cool.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
oh, thanks. No, and the Paradise Funk was a gold medal within that as well. And then with the IWSC, all three were in the 90s, and the Bittersweet Symphony was up at 95 as well, which was really, really cool. But it's funny, I said, like, I was always a bit skeptical about competitions and things, and then you get good accolades. I think I love competitions. Yes,
Well, and it makes sense if you're gonna submit things. You do the core range because you can keep touting that. In 10 years' time, it's like, oh, this one.
Yeah. Nice.
Lovely.
Nice.
So you plan to stay in the North American market? Do you have a feet in like other international markets?
Yeah, we're quite far ahead on that one. So we're in about 15 markets now. So we're mainly Europe, obviously Europe, UK, Asia. We've not done anything in the US yet, but Canada obviously being a focus for us, especially the western part of Canada, sort of BC, Alberta. That's sort of
the ones where you don't only have to work with the government
Well,
stores.
it's definitely trickier out in Ontario and Quebec and things, but there's still great whiskey markets and really enthusiastic whiskey lovers out there as well. Which so we would like to be there in future as well. But I guess in Europe is sort of UK, Germany, Netherlands, France, not Belgium yet, Denmark, Poland, Norway, Spain, so Switzerland. So quite a lot in Europe,
Nice,
and then out in Asia, we've just launched in Korea, Japan. We're available in Taiwan and looking at Hong Kong.
Nice.
So some.
I wonder if it's going to be it's going to be interesting for countries that don't have the same sort of musical tastes necessarily. Like, I don't know how many people in Japan, for example, know like Purple Haze.
So there's an interesting one I actually didn't really appreciate at the time. Like, Japan and Korea, when I went out there, are so enthusiastic about the music connection.
Oh yeah,
like, more
nice.
so than anyone.
So are we gonna see a K-pop one?
Yeah, well, that'll be the Korea exclusive. Yeah, but no, we did a tasting to launch out in Seoul, and we'd organised through the distributor to do a sort of music and whiskey event and tasting. So they had one of the DJs out there playing some of the songs and talking through the song, the inspiration, the artist and things, and then me talking through the whiskies and things and the connection, and it was really cool. And you could,
now, Frank Hudson, if you're watching this, I think we need to do that at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. Like, we'll find a musician that can do cover versions of all the songs that you pour, and
I'd love that. That'd be great fun.
We can work on that. You coming back for the festival?
So we've got nothing confirmed yet, but I was actually on the phone to Gordon this morning and saying, like, if we can still get in, if we can do it, we'd really love to do it. Yeah, nice. So I'd love to come and do it. I think the last time I was over was 2018. So yeah,
I was on the phone yesterday with Frank. I think there's maybe at least one masterclass still available.
Oh,
so,
is there? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to act quickly on it. Yeah. No, definitely.
Well, it's a good excuse to come back to BC. It's a nice place to visit.
I love it. As saying it's the. So my wife Lisa, she came with me. This time it's the first time she sort of travelled with me on a work trip, and
nice.
So we had the weekend over in Vancouver, and now she's in Victoria and things, and I hope she doesn't think all work trips are like this, because it's a high starting point. Yeah. But
fair play.
That's great.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for sharing such wonderful whiskies. I look forward to sharing some of these with our members here as well. And you're heading off to our friends over in Alberta and Vancouver again soon, aren't you?
Yeah, over to Alberta. So over to Calgary tomorrow, Edmonton on Friday. So nice. It should be good fun as well. But thanks so much for having me on. And a real pleasure to introduce everybody to our Turntable whiskies. And I hope you guys come in and try them and enjoy them. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll do Perfect. What we can.
Yeah, feel free to comment on this video, and any questions I'll try and pass along. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Find your way